Last week, tens of thousands of Israelis protested their government's plan to occupy Gaza City, and Israeli anti-war activists gatecrashed the live final of Big Brother Israel. Amid protests and political demands to end the war, polling shows that the Israeli public are firmly in favour of striking a ceasefire deal in Gaza. So in this video, we're going to explore the attitude of the Israeli public towards the war, explain why it's more about the hostages than the humanitarian situation, and why it seemingly has no impact on Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. Before we get into the polling, a quick reminder of the current situation in Gaza. Of the 251 hostages taken from Israel by Hamas and other groups on October the 7th, 2023, about 50 are still held in Gaza. However, only 20 of them are thought to still be alive. Their situation looks ever more precarious, as evidenced by recent Hamas footage of two emaciated and distressed hostages. Meanwhile, the Israeli military offensive has killed more than 61,000 Palestinians. The Gazan population is being displaced into ever smaller areas, and Israel's restriction of humanitarian aid has resulted in the worst-case scenario of famine occurring in the Strip, with a growing number of malnutrition-related deaths, now more than 200, being reported. So, what do the polls say about how Israelis view the war? In the immediate aftermath of the October the 7th attack in 2023, only 17% of Israelis thought the government should negotiate to free the hostages, even if it meant halting the fighting, according to polling by the Israeli Democracy Institute, or IDI. By October 2024, there was majority, 53%, support for ending the war. More recent Channel 12 polling from last month found that 74% of Israelis, including 60% of people who voted for Netanyahu's coalition, wanted the government to strike a comprehensive ceasefire agreement that would return all the hostages and end the war, with the same poll finding that 55% thought that Netanyahu's handling of the war in Gaza was bad. So why do Israelis want an end to the war? Put simply, it's predominantly about securing the return of the remaining hostages, while also being driven by the growing fatigue at what is now Israel's longest war, with some reservists now on their third and fourth rotation. Polling from the end of last month by the Institute for National Security Studies, or INSS, found that a majority, 61%, of the Israeli public thought that the ongoing military offensive is not advancing the return of the hostages. And this survey was done before the Israeli government announced a new expanded offensive that includes taking control of Gaza City. This plan has sparked further protests. Tens of thousands, if not more than 100,000, including hostage families, protested across Israel last weekend, demanding an end to the military campaign and the release of the remaining hostages. However, at the same time, polling shows that the escalating humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, which has been driving recent international outcry, remains a minimal factor. In October 2024, for example, 53% of Israelis thought the main reason to end the war was because it was endangering the hostages, while just 6% said it was because of the great cost in human life and the desire for quiet, peace and security. More recent data is even more stark. Last month's IDI polling found that more than 2/3 of the Israeli public were not that troubled, or not troubled at all, by the reports of famine and suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. Breaking this down further reveals a huge divide in Israeli society. The vast majority of Jewish Israelis, 79%, said they were not troubled, while conversely 86% of Arab Israelis, who make up about 1/5 of the Israeli population, said they were very or somewhat troubled. Other polls reflect a similar attitude. INSS polling from June found that 64.5% of the Israeli public, or 76.5% of Jewish Israelis, are not at all or not particularly distressed about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It's worth pointing out that according to IDI polling from last month, 68.7% of the Israeli public and 78.1% of Israeli Jews believe that Israel is making substantial efforts to avoid causing unnecessary Palestinian suffering in Gaza. However, more than 3/4 of Jewish Israelis think that when planning military operations in Gaza, Israel should not, or only to a small extent, take into account the suffering of Palestinian civilians. Other polls suggest sizable support for extreme positions on Gaza. One commissioned by Penn State academics in March 2025 found 82% of Jewish Israelis surveyed supported the forced expulsion of Gaza's population to other countries, i.e. ethnic cleansing, while according to Acord Center polling, 64% of Israelis agree with the statement that there are no innocent people in Gaza. However, none of this is to say that there is no domestic concern about the catastrophic situation in Gaza. While still small, humanitarian-rooted opposition is growing and becoming more visible. The percentage of Jewish Israelis who think Palestinian suffering should be taken into account while planning military operations is increasing, albeit in incredibly slow increments. Accusations of war crimes and genocide, well established on the world stage, are seemingly no longer taboo inside Israel. Two leading human rights organisations in Israel, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights, published reports last month concluding that Israel was perpetrating genocide in Gaza. A growing number of prominent Israelis are also speaking up. Renowned author David Grossman is now using the word genocide, while former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert said that Israel is committing war crimes, echoing what former Defence Minister Moshe Ya'alon has been saying since last year. But we should make absolutely clear that while these positions now extend beyond activist circles, they're really not mainstream, even as a majority of Israelis want an end to the war. But regardless of the reason why Israelis want a ceasefire, Netanyahu is seemingly unmoved by the majority opinion. While Netanyahu insists that the new escalation is necessary to defeat Hamas, military leadership has pushed back, saying it endangers hostages and overstretches the military. There are political motivations at play. Prolonging the war keeps on his side the extremist factions of the coalition that openly call for ethnic cleansing and settling of Gaza. For as long as Netanyahu can keep his coalition together, he can hold off a snap election, which polls consistently show his coalition losing. The prolonged war has also slowed down Netanyahu's corruption trial and has enabled him to repeatedly reject the public's call for an investigation into October the 7th security failures. Whenever and however the war eventually ends, and even after Netanyahu eventually faces what looks set to be an electoral reckoning, there'll still be deep unresolved divisions both within Israeli society and between Israelis and Palestinians. Recent INSS polling found that 81% of Jewish Israelis do not think it's possible for Israelis and Palestinians to live together with full civic equality, while Pew polling from earlier this year found that only 21% of Israelis think Israel and a Palestinian state can coexist peacefully, the lowest percentage since polling began in 2013, highlighting just how monumental the challenge of reaching genuine peace really is. Now, when you're diving into complicated topics such as this, it's quite easy to get caught up in what you know without even missing a beat. But what about the stories you don't see? Or what happens when the stories you do see are purposefully leaving out information to try and sway your thinking? Thankfully, our sponsor this week, Ground News, are experts at helping with just that. Ground News is a website and app that collects thousands of articles from around the world and puts them all in one place for you to easily compare how news is being covered by different outlets online. For each and every story, you can see the number of sources reporting on it, as well as the political bias, factuality, and ownership of said sources. For example, if we take this story on the Israeli military approving a new Gaza offensive, you can see that there are 121 sources reporting on it, with 20 of them coming from the left and 19 of them coming from the right. You can even compare the headlines to see what either side is saying, with the left generally emphasising the humanitarian implications, in contrast to the right, which uses assertive language that underscores strategic justifications. That's not all though. Ground News has tons of super handy features. Our personal favourite is their blind spot feed. Here you can find stories that have been disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum, helping you challenge your perspective on someone else's media reality. Here at TLDR, we're passionate about helping you understand how bias may affect the media you consume, something Ground News also firmly believes in. Because of this, we're offering 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage Plan subscription by using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. You can only access this discount through our link, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started today.